You were born in Rome in the first century. There was no music, no blessing, only your cry in a dark room, and one cold truth waiting for you. Your mother was a slave. In Rome, that was enough. If your mother was a slave, you were a slave too. No argument, no exception. No way to change it, no second chance. Who was your father? Maybe a soldier, maybe a landowner, maybe someone who would never think about you again. It did not matter. The system did not care about names, it cared about status. You were not born as an individual, you were born as property. Your first days passed quickly, your mother was rarely beside you. Not because she did not love you, but because she belonged to someone else. She was needed in the fields, more than in that dark room with you. Here, feelings had no value. Labor did. You grew up without choices. No education, no encouragement. No dream was offered to you. No future was promised. This great empire stood on stone, and on lives like yours. Welcome to Rome. Your fate was written before you opened your eyes. You don't remember exactly when you understood that hunger was normal. Maybe it was the nights your stomach growled and no one reacted. Here, hunger was not an accident. It was part of the schedule. Food was rarely enough. You learned to eat slowly to trick your body. You learned to say, "I'm full," even when your stomach was still empty. If you seemed to need more, you became a problem. And in Rome, being a problem was dangerous. You slept in the ergasla, stone cells built to hold slaves. No windows, no sunlight, only the tired breathing of others, and the smell of damp stone clinging to your skin. By the age of 9, you were sent to the fields. Not because you were strong enough, but because you were useful enough. The sun burned your back for hours. Noticed rarely ended well. There was no noticed rarely ended well. There was no childhood here, only labor measured in days. And you were learning your place. A small part inside a machine much larger than you. You were 12 when your life changed owners. No one asked what you wanted. That morning began like every other. Fields, head down, work. Then a stranger arrived. Clean clothes, cold eyes. The guard stood straighter when he passed. You did not know his name. You only knew he mattered. That night, the guards called a few names. Yours was one of them. Your heart pounded so loud you thought others could hear it. Being called out alone was never good news. They lined you up in silence. No explanation, no warning, just orders. You saw your old master beside the visitor. They spoke briefly, then nodded. That was enough. You understood. You had been sold. In the confusion, you saw your mother. She stood at a distance. Her shoulders trembled slightly, her eyes were red. Pulled you away. You were not allowed to pull you away. You were not allowed to look back for long. 12 years in one dark place ended that night. Not with freedom, but with a new chain. You no longer belonged to that land. You belonged to another shadow waiting ahead. You thought you were used to hardship. You were wrong. After a long day being marched along dusty roads, you saw Rome for the first time. The city was vast, loud, and crowded. It smelled of sweat and smoke. Voices echoed everywhere. This was the center of the empire, the heart of power. But nothing here was meant for you. You were not taken to a villa, not taken to a market, not allowed to disappear into the crowd. You were led straight to a gray stone prison, cold and heavy like its laws. The iron gate shut behind you. The sound felt final. Your new role was explained in a few short words. You would assist inside the prison. It sounded official. It was not. You carried food to exhausted prisoners. You scrubbed the stone floors after interrogations. You kept metal tools clean, sharp, ordered, ready. No one needed you to be exceptional. They needed you to be precise. Here, mistakes were not corrected. Mistakes were replaced. You learned to move quietly, not to ask questions, not to look too long, not to show reaction. You tried to become invisible. For a while it worked, until someone began to notice you. He entered the room without introduction. No one said his name. No one needed to. everyone knew. Carnifex, the man responsible for the confessions Rome wanted. Not for truth, for order. You heard his voice before you saw him. Low, calm. He did not need to shout. The room went silent anyway. You tried to avoid his eyes. It was too late. He saw you. Not as a child, not as a slave, but as a tool not yet sharpened. A few days later, you were called in during interrogations. No longer just cleaning after, you stood in the corner. You watched. At first, your stomach tightened. You heard the pleading. Metal striking stone. The same questions asked again and again. You told yourself this was survival. If you did not learn, you would be replaced. Carnifex gave short instructions. Clear, exact, no emotion. Then one day he gave you a small task. Not a decision, just assistance. Your hands shook, but you did not stop. In Rome, hesitation was more dangerous than error, and you were learning not to hesitate. At first, you told yourself this was only a phase, a temporary step to survive. You did not choose this path, it chose you. But in Rome, what feels temporary often becomes permanent. You grew used to that room, torchlight casting long shadows on stone walls. The air thick and hard to breathe. Questions repeated like a practiced ritual. You no longer stood in the corner. You stood closer. You heard more. You understood more. Carnifex corrected every small detail. Your tone had to stay even. Your eyes had to stay cold. Your silence had to last just long enough. No anger, no shouting, only certainty. The first time you led a full interrogation, your heart raced, but your hands did not shake. You followed the process exactly. Question. Silence. Observe. Repeat. When it ended, Carnifex gave a slight nod. No praise. No reward. But here that nod meant everything. In the weeks that followed, you were called more often. Guards stepped aside when you passed. Prisoners avoided your gaze. And then you noticed something worse. You were no longer shocked. The sounds did not unsettle you. The room no longer felt heavy. You were becoming efficient, and Rome valued efficiency. Everything changed when Carnifex disappeared. No notice, no explanation. One morning, he simply did not walk those cold stone halls. In Rome, people could be removed without a trace. You were summoned. No ceremony, no congratulations. Just a short command. From now on, you were responsible. You were 20 years old, and now you were Carnifex. No one asked if you felt ready. Here, skill mattered more than feeling. You had proven you were capable. That was enough. Interrogations began and ended on your signal. Guards waited for your nod. Files were placed before you. Names, charges, long accusations. Evidence was often thinner than the words. But that was not the point. You understood something clearly. Rome did not require perfect truth. Rome required confession. At first, you still paused before decisions. You allowed yourself a moment of thought, but the workload did not allow hesitation. Cases moved quickly. If someone refused to speak, there were ways to make them speak. You were no longer the student in the corner. You stood at the center of the room, and each time the iron door closed behind a new prisoner, you knew you had become what you once feared most. One day, the file placed before you felt different. Not like the others. The accused was a Roman man, not a slave, not a common criminal. A citizen, charged with ties to Sejanus. A name people had started to fear. In Rome, standing too close to the wrong man was enough. By law, a slave could not interrogate a Roman citizen. But laws shifted with the emperor's mood, and Tiberius needed confessions more than principles. The man was brought into the room. His wife and children were brought in too. You understood the message. No one had to say it. He resisted for days. Silence, denial. He repeated that he was innocent. You followed procedure, questions, pressure, time. In the end, he collapsed. Not because the truth changed, but because endurance has limits. The trial was brief. The confession was read like a prepared script. Then the final order reached you. Make it slow. You carried out the sentence before a loud crowd, not from personal hatred, not from anger, only because it was required. That night, you did not sleep. For the first time in years, something shifted. You understood clearly. You were not just serving the system. You were protecting your own life, at the cost of someone else's. After years of repeating the same rhythm, you began to notice something. You no longer felt anything. No anger, no fear, no clear regret. Just emptiness. During the day, you worked as usual. At night, you lay awake staring at the stone ceiling. You listened to the wind move through iron bars. Faces from that room appeared in your sleep. They did not speak. They only looked at you. The thought of leaving Rome did not come as a brave decision. It came like the need to breathe. You understood the risk. Runaway slaves rarely succeeded, but staying meant remaining a tool, a function inside the machine. One night when the corridor was quieter than usual, you walked. No bag, no long plan, only quick steps, and a thin hope you could disappear. You did not make it out of the city. They found you before dawn. No dramatic chase. Rome had too many eyes. You were bound and taken back. No one shouted at you. No one needed to. The sentence was already understood. For the first time in years, you were not standing at the center of the room. You were standing on the other side. They do not delay. Rome does not waste time on broken tools. You are taken back to the familiar room. The torches still burn. The stone walls are still cold. Nothing has changed except your position. This time, you are tied to the chair in the center. The same chair. The man who enters is not a stranger. He was once your student. He used to stand in the corner watching you the way you once watched Carnifex. At first he avoids your eyes, his hand tightens around the tool. You see the hesitation. You know that feeling well. You speak quietly just for him. Do not hesitate. If you do, we both suffer. He nods. Everything moves slowly, no drama, no shouting. Only the familiar process. Now used on you. You realize you trained him well. When the final blade is raised, you do not resist. There is no backup plan, no last move. You try to remember your mother, her eyes the last time you saw her, but the memory fades. The blade comes down. Rome keeps running, as it always does, and you disappear, as if you were never there.